Hey, welcome, guys. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I was asked a while back to share a little bit about me and my story. So I decided to break my life's journey and story down into about three different segments, is what I'm feeling it's going to be right about now. And that is just due to the length and complexity of some of the things I believe that feel I'm being led to talk about and share with everybody out there. And let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Norman Stickle, and I have been not really putting this off for a long time, but I've really been just waiting, and I guess waiting is a good way to put it, but waiting for the right time to really do this. It was asked early in me recording some of the first initial videos I ever put on YouTube, which I do not have a lot of content, but I believe it serves a very direct purpose, and it is meant for a specific individual within its content and its meaning and its impact behind it is where the thought process came in at the time. My future plans are to, as I have personally evolved myself on a humane level, and my personal evolution has changed over the course of putting those previous videos out and to where I am now, even though it has not been years and years, but more or less, without going back and looking, it's probably been around a year or so. There's been a lot of progress made underneath the surface, and I feel that at some point, sooner than later, there will be more or less an outside reflection of what has changed within me. Because I believe at some point, the outside image has to align with our inside as well. And holding a vision of yourself, in your mind's eye is only going to carry you so far unless you actually outwardly put it into play. Meaning even down to the way that you dress and your attire and your clothes and your associations with people, family and friends, your place of employment, the things you feed yourself on a spiritual level, emotional level. All these things take into account of who we really are at the core essence of that. And I feel at some point, if it's really going to follow through and actually become a full-blown known reality, it's got to take place on the outside as well. I think that may be one of the last, or maybe for some people, it's one of the first things that actually takes place. I definitely have dabbled with changing my attire and the way I show up, because it's very true. First impressions are definitely the most noteworthy when you meet somebody, and that will always tend to stick with you. And then to shake that and try and change that first impression that somebody has of you can be downright extremely difficult, if not, I don't like using the word, but impossible to a degree, because we can control our character and only ourselves, but we can never really fully control our reputation the way others see us. So with that being said, these are just some of the thoughts that I've really been thinking about. A lot of what I talk about and how I present it is intuitively led. I tend to kind of know a basic generalization of what it is that I'm being led to talk about and to present to people. But after a certain point of getting over the first initial nervousness of actually opening my mouth, and especially being on camera, I have a lot more comfortable without a camera, talking on a podcast, which I do have as well. But camera is still one of those things that I'm not fully comfortable with, but you only get better as time goes on and the more you do it out of repetition. And so it's also part of a growth process for myself to do this on camera and a different platform. So I believe that, podcasting has its place, but also too, a platform like YouTube is one of those things that is unique unto its own. So I don't want to leave that off of the table, so to speak. But with that and this extra long drug out intro, we can start getting into it. If you have seen some of my previous videos, most of them were surrounded and based off of a lot of the dramatic, emotional things that I've been through in my life, and from my perspective, uniquely from my perspective. And it has never once been to put down or bash anybody else or anything along that lines, or belittle anybody. That's why I never mentioned any solid details of anything. But it's unique as to my journey and my perspective and my healing. And I believe that is something that we should all hold sacred to ourselves, because our perception of our world is projected back to us. And at the time, that's what I was going through and I needed to be able to move on in my life. And I do not hold any ill intentions or feelings towards any of those things that ever happened to me. I have made peace with them, and I have chosen to move on. And yes, it is part of my story, and I do reflect on those times once in a while, but I do not stay there and I do not live there, and I will not let it control my future. I let it be part of my story, because stories sell, and stories help motivate and impact others, but also too by leading by example. So, it's very important to me, and it helps me process and deal and heal with things as I share them with you. So, with that being said, the things I talked about in those videos were, really a lot of it took place, in my 20s and 30s, leading up until, this last 5 years or so, that good chunk of time in my life. But really, all of our journeys start way before that. And if you believe in any sense of spiritualism or religion, which are completely different, that's a whole other video topic and nothing we need to get to and debate today, because I respect everybody's views, and I believe that we all have them unique to ourselves. I personally am more spiritual. I do not conform to one set or identify with any set religion, nor will I ever. I did grow up in a organized church background, but I have matured and grown past that, and that has not always worked for me. But I do believe in past lives and certain things, aspects of one's self-evolution, and some of the things that I've been through and how I've gone about healing myself have led me to believe these things even more so by some of the coaching practices and the modalities that I have experimented with and researched and tried for myself have further cemented these beliefs within me. But my journey, really, if you look at it, obviously starts at birth, in this physical world at least. And one of the first big impactful things I believe that happened to me in this lifetime was I had a stroke when I was 13 months old. And obviously I was too young to remember it. So for a lot of us, not just myself, I'm speaking for myself, but I believe for a lot of people, there are a lot of blank spots within our childhood. It is proven that through the mind and certain ways and reasonings and certain things happen, the mind will protect itself and suppress things to be able to maintain the highest state of order and health within the body and the soul and the mind. So some of these things are suppressed. Yes, there are ways of getting to them if it is ever wanted, needed, or necessary. But then again, they are protected for our higher good, because the mind has a ideal blueprint for what the body is at optimal health, and will always revert back to that when it is all possible. And sometimes certain things, if they're not causing you problems, then really what is the need to bring it up again? Unless you really are just driven to figure out what some of those things are. But if you ask yourself, is this a problem for me? And it's a trigger, whether it be an emotional thing or could be a good thing or a bad thing. But if you really wonder why certain things impact us certain ways, most of the time it goes back to your imprint period in your upbringing. And if you believe in past lives and certain things, then some things I believe are brought into this lifetime from past lifetimes. So it's really all a matter of perspective. I believe that there is really no right or wrong answer to these things, but it's a matter of whether it's your truth, and that's really all that matters. So the first monumental thing that ever happened to me in this life was I had a stroke when I was 13 months old. I do know that I was paralyzed, and I spent a good amount of time in the hospital. I had the stroke when I was living in California at the time, and obviously I don't recall a lot of things for very good reasons. The next major thing that I can remember is that I was initiated and told was that I was relocated to Washington State when I was approximately about 2.5 years old, because when I was about that age, my younger sister, my full-blood sister, was actually born. And I don't really know the reasoning behind it, but I know that my parents relocated us up here to Washington. I have a couple of vague memories of being told that my grandmother came down to visit, and before we moved, and certain things from out of the state of California, and things like that. But a lot of it is just instances that have been told to me or passed down. So really, most of my childhood are just blips of really nothingness and just vague memories and feelings, if I was really to put some effort into really trying to remember what those things are. And I probably will get into some of them as they come back to me, as I'm telling this. But I know that after I was relocated, I obviously, one of the reoccurring conditions or side effects that I had after my stroke was I started having grand mal seizures. And I do know that I was paralyzed. And around that time, I can imagine how it really affected me. Obviously, I don't remember thinking or feeling a certain way, but it has been recalled to me that I was paralyzed and in a wheelchair right around the time that I was really trying to make some momentum, because most 13-month-old babies are developing at an incredible rate and trying to walk and, really seek things out for themselves. And, I can't help but to think really what my mother and father were thinking and feeling around this time, and the emotions that my mother was having to go through, whether it be fear or I wonder if she was angry or, I've asked her a few times over the years, but obviously it's not something that's talked about a lot. And even then, when I have asked her about certain things early from my childhood, it has not been recalled very easily. So I don't really have a need to know those things. I just kind of have made peace with them and let them go. But I do know that I was located and taken to and became a patient of Children's Hospital up in Seattle. And I believe I had a pretty long journey, as far as that goes. I had seizures for as long as I can remember, up until 30 years old, which I may have talked about in some of my previous videos. And we'll get to it when the time comes. But that's a monumental time and landmark in my life, where my life literally dramatically shifted at one point at 30 years old. And we'll get more into that later. But obviously, we got quite a few years to cover before I get there. So, with that being said, I don't remember. I can remember bits and pieces of things, and I'm not even really sure about what age I was. But one of the next monumental things I believe that happened to me was I had a second stroke at about 9 years old. And I am unaware of all the side effects and if anything completely changed then. I do remember around, I believe it was after 9, but maybe closer to like 11 or 12, um, participating and taking studies through the University of Washington Medical Center in Seattle. And I remember one of the times I stayed for, I believe, a week in the hospital. I was hooked up to an IV. I believe I was taking off my medicine, my pills, and I had the whole EEG thing on my head, which now, learning about later in life, is extremely incredible. I had the same thing, but a completely different method of it during my surgery at 30, and we'll get more into that later. But I remember that hospital stay not being the greatest in my life. No kid wants to stay in the hospital. I remember they tried to make it fun for me in certain senses, but I remember specifically my arm twitching at one point, really, really bad. And at least one of the nurses on the occasion really had a tough time hitting my veins at the time, and my arm twitched. And I could still almost see the visualization of it, but I had this humongous blood blister bruise in the crack of my arm. And I remember to this day, I still will struggle with things, feelings of having my blood drawn and needles poked so much. It's almost like I get this tingling sensation in my arms and my veins, and I get like this scratching feeling, like I got a scratch. And I think that maybe just everything we go through, good, bad, or indifferent, positive or negative, will leave some sort of emotional signature with it, and neural pathway linked to the experience. That's why it can be very traumatic and dangerous to bring up certain situations in a non-controlled, safe environment. The same thing goes for something happy. You know, if you think hard enough on something and concentrate on the happiest moment of your life, you will physically feel that sensation of those emotions again. And the same thing goes for something like that. Here I have been seizure-free since, 2009. And there are still times that I feel that sensation to want to scratch the cracks of my arms and the tops of my hands from where I've had my fingers poked and IVs over the years. But that really, I believe, started the whole process of dislike for, and a sense of indifference of the medical community, because at that young of an age, I still wasn't fully grasping and understand the reason of why and the what ifs and all those things. I just was not at that mature level. Now, obviously, that has completely changed, and I see that there is a place for certain things, but also, too, just, the inconvenience of certain things that I had to go through. A lot of the feelings that I have experienced, I would say, as a young man, like I said, I don't remember a lot of the memories, don't trigger things prior to really 9 or 11. If I really have to think about it, that's really one of my first dramatic experiences of really realizing that hospital was a way of life. I do know and can still visualize myself, and if I think hard enough, probably the taste of it. But before I could learn to swallow pills, I'm unsure of my age necessarily, but I did take medicine my entire life. For 30 years, I took medicine, different kinds. And that's a whole different experience that we'll get into when the time comes as a teenager, trial and error for a lot of things. But I can still visually remember on at least a handful of occasions, my mother crushing my pills up in a spoonful of jelly, more or less specifically, I believe, strawberry, and feeding me the pills because I wasn't quite efficient at taking them yet. But also, too, if they weren't mixed up enough and then I didn't swish it around or, move it just right, I would literally taste the bitterness of the pills. And at the time, I believe the pills were pink. So things like that really put a sour taste in my mouth. And obviously, as I got older and things, I graduated being able to ingest pills with little to no water at all and just kind of just dry choke them down, so to speak, which is nothing to be proud of. But it's my way of humorously looking at, being okay with taking those things, you know. But you know, like one of the big things that sticks out at me in the process of growing up that I really had to deal with later on, and I'll get more into detail later, but that is the fact that it was always, are you okay? You know, and being babied and being watched out. And I can't blame anybody for that, but I believe like my whole family to a degree was a contributor of those thoughts and feelings and actions. I believe everybody was kind of programmed to, oh, watch out for Norman, you know, and or they didn't say anything. Um, and I think looking back now and some of the things that I've done for myself to better my own situation in life and heal myself of a lot of the ill confidence and the fear and the, you know, the qualities of me that needed maturing, I believe came up at one, you know, at different times. But for me, I never saw myself as a child with a disability, nor did I ever want to act like it. I climbed trees. I played baseball. You know, I tried football. I didn't really care for it that much. Um, you know, I rode a YZ80 when I was approximately, you know, 12 or 13, I think, for the first time. And, you know, I skateboarded and, you know, without a helmet in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up and, you know, all these things. So I never really saw myself or relayed my self image to being a kid with a disability, nor did I ever want to. And I think that is a key factor and very important for people to realize that your self image is so important and carries so much weight with how you show up in the world and how people perceive you. Although it is not our responsibility how others see us, because we can only control what's within ourselves and what's important, but also too, you know, that will directly affect the way that we show up and the way that we play at the game of life. And how and where the mix of my self-image of not necessarily holding myself back and limiting myself or worrying about having seizures at the time. Obviously, you know, I don't remember even really being conscious of them. Um, I do know that I never did have a warning or an aura. A lot of people with seizures will get lightheaded, have a funny feeling, um, and that's kind of a body's sense or a cue to say, "Hey, sit down, take a chill, you know, stop driving, whatever you're doing." And you know, I never did have that actually, so that was a great disadvantage, and we'll get into that later about how I had multiple NDEs, near-death experiences in my life because of that part of the disability and the side effect of that. But you know, my self-image, maybe I'll learn something by telling this, but I, you know, really, I believe that there's some sort of either is still to this day, or maybe there was to a big degree, and maybe part of it's been resolved. I'm kind of having this realization as I talk about this, and part of that is good and why I do this, to be an inspiration and example to others, but also too because it helps me process what we write down and what we talk about goes through us and it flows through us, and it actually we're hearing ourselves say these things, or we're physically writing these things out, and it makes a difference because it sticks with us and it moves through us, and we're able to learn and release, and all these, you know, it has awesome effects, even though it can be extremely difficult and painful at times. There is great benefits to writing and speaking your thoughts. So I really encourage you to, if that is something you've been shying away from but feel the nudge to do, find the right environment, find the right people, and pursue that. You know, as a teenager, I wrote and journaled a lot of things, and at a certain point in my life, that journal was taken from me, and I really wish I had those because it would be a great way to look back and say, wow, you know, That's crazy, you know. A lot of that came at a very specific certain time in my life at around 15, 16 years old. Obviously, that'll probably be included in the next segment. This one's going to go up until around 15 of what I can remember or so. And then I'll start that one as a second, the second continuation of this, I believe, a 3-part series, like I mentioned. But, like I believe there's some sort of incongruency where people are always, oh, careful, Norman, or don't do that, or, are you okay? And the tiptoeing around, I believe it undermined my confidence. And in coaching, in my style of coaching that I have been trained in, and I'm a master coach in, and I would say if I had to choose one niche of really specifically coaching anybody, it would be probably this, because it is extremely my background. But also, too, it is a part of me that was literally fragmented. My confidence was shattered because it caused a seed of doubt within me. And it caused me to second guess myself, which happens to a lot of people. And it probably happened to you, unless it's still happening to you. And if it has gone unaddressed, I would strongly urge you to address it, because your life will dramatically change. Dramatically change. And yes, it is not going to be fun. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you, because you have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. On the other side of your fear and indecision and doubts and insecurities is the greatest reward you've ever fought for. I promise you that. But you have to be willing to get uncomfortable. If you're not willing, don't even start. It's not going to happen. I'm telling you this with all sincerity, heartfelt. You can feel my passion, feel my sincerity, and realize that it is the truth. And I humbly say that, yes, I understand what I'm talking about, because I believe in what I'm talking about, and I would not be sharing it if I did not. So some of these points will be very, very heartfelt, but they will also be very uncomfortable for you to listen to, because it may cause you to have quite a few realizations, and it might stir some emotions and things within you that you've been suppressing for a long time, consciously or subconsciously. We do them both because of that fact. And things like this are meant to do that in a healthy way, because it'll cause you to grow through it. So with that, I can go on and on a lot about that. But with that being said, it caused an indifference within me. And I feel that at some point, it caused a cycle of gaining confidence to do something as I got older and wanted to. And then that seed of indecision and doubt and that questioning myself, can I do this? And, and processing like that became automatic because it was fed to me at such a young age. One of the greatest periods of your life will be from birth to 7 years old. You might say, well, Norman, why is that? It's because it's considered the imprint period of your life. Your brain waves are in a state of hypnosis 24 hours a day, 365 days for literally 7 years. And why is that significant and important? Because everything that is being fed to you through your environment, which you have no control over, and if you do, I'd like to know how, because at that age we are just kind of just present. You know what I mean? We don't get to choose our parents. We don't get to choose our environment. You know, um, good, bad, negative, positive, indifferent, doesn't matter what it is. We don't have control over our environment. Parents throw on something on TV. And we just literally are just soaking up like a sponge everything that's coming at us, and we unequivocally accept it for its truth. So hence, we are products of our environment. And then at about 7, we start to get a little bit older, where our brainwaves change and tend to only go there at nighttime. And the consciousness kind of comes a little more to the forefront, rather than our subconscious and higher self just completely being present. But what that happens is we start to get old enough to realize, and yes, we've learned patterns and certain things, as a baby, like my son, is learning right now, key things, but a lot of that will really start to make sense and take effect later. He'll make use of it later. But these things are literally just shaping us, and then when we get old enough, we start to question our feelings and the way we think and all this stuff, So then these incongruencies start to rise, and that's exactly what happened with me. And we all struggle sometimes with things our entire lives. Sometimes they get healed to a degree, and we think they're gone, and other times, things are never fully resolved, and it's really up to us whether we want to heal them. But even as I say this, I'm realizing that there are moments that I still will catch myself in this pattern. And I have done a lot of work on it, but obviously there's still more to be done. So you know what? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to make a note, and I'm going to put it into action, and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to seek out what it is. There's big moments in life where we have these epiphanies, these aha moments, that are really meant to help us spur us on to the next project, the next way of being and thinking and seeing and feeling, all this stuff, But these incongruencies will really hold you back. For years, throughout my teens and especially my 20s, we'll get to that at a different time, but really, like, in these last 5 years or so, since I really ramped up my self-care and self-discovery after some big traumatic events in my life that I did go through in some of my other videos, I realized that I had stopped and started projects my entire life. And I think I'm actually now having the realization that a lot of that stems from the indecision, the lack of confidence, the questioning myself. And do I blame my family and my mother and my family? Absolutely not. They were doing the best they could with the tools and resources they had available. I can't imagine what my mother and father felt like growing up, wondering. My dad trying to go to work every day, make ends meet, doing the best he could. But the difference between my self-image and, what I was being fed, I believe, was incongruent. I remember having a friend at a different area I lived. I don't even know exactly how old I was. I believe I was fairly young. I want to say maybe 5 or 7. Give or take. It kind of is feeling like it was around that age. And I don't even know how long we lived there, but it was a little more closer in the city of Seattle, suburb of Seattle. I remember I had a friend, and I found out later on in life he was actually had seizures as well. I believe I remember his name. I think it was like I think it started with a J or something like that. But I have a couple of instances where we played together on the street and stuff. And we had like lunch dates and things like that. But other than that, I don't really remember a lot. But what I do remember is always wanted to be that little boy and not be an epileptic. I played baseball for quite a few years because it was one of the safer sports, obviously. You know, I played catcher and outfield, and you know, I remember batting and stuff, and you know, but being the product, I believe and feel and what I would consider to be of a codependent. Being raised by a codependent can really considered me to be a, I talked about it in an earlier video, but an empath and an empathetic person, extremely empathetic person. Because of that, a lot of codependents produce children that are empaths. Um, and that's a whole nother, I did do a video on the codependency and empath and, you know, the difference in things. And it really stems in a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about when it comes down to it. But we're not going to get too far off a track with that. But, you know, the whole thing of wanting to be a boy and experience life, but yet at the same time, the fears and the self-doubt and all these things that were taking place within my fragile mindset and the confidence carried on with me. And still some aspects of it are still with me to this day. But I do not let it rule my life anymore. I power through it and I confront it head on. Because I think that life is precious. I remember specifically one time I climbed a tree on the outside of the tree. I had a 3-level tree fort in one of the places I grew up in. We'd sleep up in the summer. I could see the, you know, downtown Seattle and all this stuff. It was amazing. And I was playing camouflage, and then the, you know, when all the leaves were bloomed, you could barely see it. Had trap doors. It was badass. You know, and we climbed on the outside of it and stuff. And I fell out of that tree one time. You know, right on my tailbone. You know, I hit a ball over the fence. I scaled the sticker bushes. You know, but then that voice would come back. You know, a seed of self-doubt and confidence, and you know, are you doing this right, or you shouldn't be doing that, or you're going to hurt yourself, and you know, oh, be careful, Norman, be careful. Ugh. Excuse me. I'm recording this live, but not live. You know, and there's a thing professionally known as a gestalt. A gestalt is the beginning of something. It's the seed that was planted. And a lot of times those seeds are so buried, so deep within you, and you have a tough time discovering where they're at. But they're there, and they will remain there until dealt with. And the impact that that seed can carry to reflect, if not every aspect of your life, but quite a few, if not every aspect of decision making, relationship, job, choice you make. Certain things will have a greater impact than others, of course. But never underestimate the power of planting a seed. Good, bad, or indifferent, it will take effect to a degree, especially at a young, impressionable age. You know, as we're adults, it's easier to brush off, but it still doesn't mean that it does not cross your thought process, or you might go, well, what if? Maybe I can't do that. You know what I mean? That's all it takes. And even that even goes now for now as an adult. Be aware of what you put into yourself and what you feed yourself, and how you let others influence you. If there's something that you do not agree with, say, you know, scratch that, scratch that out. You know, erase that, clean slate, get rid of it. You have that power over your subconscious mind, but you have to train yourself to do so, and you have to be vigilant about it. Because with so many thoughts that we have a day and so many things coming at us consistently on a split-second basis, and a lot of it depends on where you're at. I'm sitting in a quiet office right now. Imagine if I was at the mall walking around, at a baseball game, dozens, hundreds of people around me, conversations, you know, and there's only so much things that are filtered through our filter system, but that doesn't mean that your brain and your ears are not taking in everything else it's hearing. So It's very is a huge people brush it off, but it's absolutely a serious thing to keep in mind. But as I got older and I started to gain more control, I can remember wanting to do things, in life and really wanting to be normal, but feeling so inadequate, almost broken to a degree, of confidence, and that carried on. And as we wind down this video, my thoughts are that at such a young age, you're really not responsible for the things that you're fed through your environment because you don't, like I said before, you don't really have any control over it. But as an adult, you are 100% responsible for what you feed yourself. But what a lot of people don't realize is everything that we accept as a truth, our truth, personal truth, is something that is true for you. It may not be a fact, like the sun rises every day. That's a fact. A truth would be, I like strawberry ice cream, but not chocolate. That's a truth for you, just as an example. All of our truths stem from that time when we were growing up. And that's how we shape our way we view the world when we show up, like I said. But as we get older, we start forming our own opinions and feelings and thought process and our voice. Well, that's usually where the incongruencies and things start to arise. And then at a certain point, it makes a shift to where we are fully responsible for those things. But every time as a child, you are shot down, so to speak, of speaking your mind and, I want this or I want that. Somebody says, oh, no, we don't have that. I don't have enough money for that, or we can't do that, or not right now, or, you weren't, all those things take effect on us, Or do you think that's the right choice? They ask us, and that causes seeds of doubt. And they don't, what the thing is a lot of times people don't even realize the impact they're having on somebody. It's huge. Absolutely huge. Don't even realize the impact that. But you can't really know what that other person or that little tiny individual is experiencing because you're not inside their head. You can hear somebody say something to a little kid, and I catch myself doing it, and I'm not one to judge by any means, but because of some of the things that I've been through in the train, and all my background and my history, I'm keen on certain things, picking up certain things, and it is not always my place or responsibility to say anything, and that can be a tough thing to carry around. Obviously, if it was extremely enough, or life or death, or if it called for, absolutely, I'm held by oath. Not only by integrity wise, but professionally wise, I'm held to that, where I have to speak up and say something. I've taken that oath, in more than one area of my life. But that's not just from a professional standpoint. That is part of my core values and ethics of integrity. But people don't realize that the impact that it has on others. And I'm here to tell you that the only way to really change it is to dig down into it and hit it head on. I'm going to say that, from the time that I was in this house where the 3-level tree fort was and things like that, that was a kind of a pivotal moment. I remember the neighbor kid had pretty much everything. He was an only child and stuff like that. I had a room in the basement, and we were happy. We had everything we needed for the most part. I did grow up not the most advantaged child, you know, went to the food bank, had powdered milk and, other things. And, I remember moving 5 or so times throughout my life, 6 times or so, um, until my mom ended up in the house that she is still in to this day. And that was about 15 years old, which we'll kind of cover in the next segment. I can remember living, at least 4 other places, moving around and things like that. I always remember feeling an affinity with animals and always feeling like was different than my whole family, like a black sheep, but also that I never felt like I fit in. And to this day, I still don't. I am the oddball. I'm not part of the clan, really. And I'm okay with that. I've come to terms with that. Um, and I know that it's because of certain circumstances and my calling here on this planet to do, to be that way. And that's fine. I 100% have accepted it. Um, and that doesn't go just for my immediate family, but a lot of my acquaintances and my bigger circle of people, I'm the same way. I'm a lone wolf, but I'm okay with that. You know, um, it's taught me a lot, and you know, I embrace it 100%. But like life is definitely what you make of it. And be vigilant about what you feed yourself, the environment, the friends, the people, the TV, the radio. You know, that will directly have a direct reflection upon how you show up, not only for yourself, but what you demand of yourself. Your standards of living, working, relationships, everything will stem from the roots of your self-image and how you show up. I've been on the path transforming my life, my whole life, but really actively, vigilantly the last 5 years, 7 years. It started long before. It started long before it actually really physically started making an appearance. You know, it was a feeling, an inkling, and a dream, and a premonition, all these things way before I actually physically started moving my body in the direction that I wanted to go. Because your heart and your mind have to meet. Your heart and your soul have to meet. You know, um, but at this point, I'm last house. With the 3-level tree fort, I was probably around 12-ish or so. We stayed there until I was around 15 years old. Um, and we were getting ready to move. My parents finally were able to buy a home. Um, I have faith that a lot of things that are supposed to come out in this will come out. Some of the big impactful things, and this will come in the next video, but my father, I am named after not only my father, but my grandfather, and which is an honor and a kind of an old school way of doing things. And, I like that. It's my name and, whatnot. But at the same time, like, I have a hard time remembering my father. I can remember going to his job, what I remember. I think the only job I think really one of the only jobs I ever really truly remember was him working at a steel warehouse. And we'd go down there at one point in our life and, you know, um, have lunch with him once in a while and stuff. And there was an old guy named Hank, and one of my dad's other friends and stuff, was one of the drivers, I think, and stuff. And they were friends outside of work, and we used to hang out with their family and stuff, you know. But out of a lot of those things, like I do remember going camping. That was one thing I do remember about my dad and my upbringing. Like I love the outdoors. My dad's showed me how to start fires, you know, and use an axe, even though it was kind of dangerous. And, my dad was definitely a big proponent of helping me become a man, and instilling those things in me. Um, I think my mom was a little more guarded through her insecurities of, motherhood or whatever, being a codependent. I think a lot of it had to do with the way that she raised me. Um, she stayed home for most of my upbringing. I do remember when I was more or less like a preteen, her cleaning houses, and me and my sister would go with her and things like that. But with that being said, my father really did cheer me on through baseball and sports, and let me play football and things like that. Even though I didn't really care for it, I tried one season. It wasn't really for me because of my head, getting my head hit a lot through seizures and things. It was a very uncomfortable thing for me, and I believe that had to stem also back from my confidence and things. So a lot of things are tied in there. Um, I have some decent memories of my dad, but he also had his own struggles, obviously, and that will come more or less in the next segment where I'll start, a little bit before 15-ish. I'll kind of backtrack a tiny bit and cover a little bit more of my father and my relationship with my father, because it will then in turn lead into the next video. And I think it's important to it's part of my story, and it's part of my development and my healing process that I had to go through. Um, but I thank him for a lot of the things that he did teach me and instilled in me. But at the same time, I will say that, because he's not with me anymore, and has not been for quite some time, that, it really left a big what if and void within me. And my mom and dad were separated a handful of times, prior to being, 15, 16. And, hearing those things, they never did like directly confront each other in front of us. It was always behind doors, but just like a lot of other child situations, you can still hear that stuff sometimes. But compiled, it really dramatically affected me personally. So there's no shame in it, no shame in healing, no shame in your story at all, because it's unique unto your own, and that's makes you who you are. But it does not have to be your truth now. You can learn to transgress it, transcend it, and move on. So, with that being said, I think it's a good place to close. But thank you guys. My plan is to go back through this a little bit. I'm not going to edit it, actually. I'm just going to leave it as is because I believe it is delivered exactly the way it's supposed to. But my plan is over the next couple of days to continue on with part 2 and part 3. And I will post this to my page. And if and when this ever strikes a chord with you, please feel free to leave a review, comment, get a hold of me if you find anything, and we'll get a little more deeper into it as the next video comes along. But thank you guys very much.